Let's face it, the holiday season is super busy. And if you're like me, you may find that you just don't have the time to meal plan during November and December. If you're looking for nutritious and convenient meals, try Factor. Factor is not TV dinners. Factor is chef prepared, dietitian approved, and ready to eat meals that will save you precious time and help you stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Now, with Factor, you can rest assured that you're making an environmentally friendly choice. Factor offsets 100% of their delivery emissions, and they source 100% renewable electricity for their production sites. So skip that extra trip to the grocery store, skip that prepping, at least for the holiday season. Head to factormeals.com/sustainable50 and use code sustainable50 to get 50% off. Sustainable50 at factormeals.com/sustainable50 to get 50% off. Well, hello there, my friends, and welcome back. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 418 of Sustainable Minimalist. This is a show about intentional and eco-friendly minimalist living. I have a down and dirty intentional living show for you today. And that's because on today's show, we're discussing the why and how of gratitude. Why we need to make grateful living more than just another thing to check off on our to-do lists, and how exactly to do it. Often when we think about having a quote unquote gratitude practice, we tend to list off 3 things we're grateful for, right? And these 3 things are often external items. Perhaps they're people we are happy that are in our life. Perhaps they're items like a home or warm coffee. But the point is that the people, the things that we list off in our gratitude practice, they're external items. And so maybe, just maybe, our culture has bastardized gratitude, so to speak, corrupted it maybe. Because even when we're practicing gratitude, so many of us are looking for someone or something outside of ourselves to be grateful for. Now, we are merely a week away from Thanksgiving here in the United States, and yet, how many of us are looking forward to those Black Friday sales? How many of us are making our holiday wish lists? How many of us are knee deep in the holiday grind in which we're going without ever stopping and awakening to the miracle, yes, the miracle of opening our eyes each morning? My guest today argues that we need to simplify the concept of the gratitude practice. Today, I'm speaking with Kristi Nelson. Kristi has a book out right now. It is perfect for this season, and it is titled Wake Up Grateful, The Practice of Taking Nothing for Granted. Kristi, I am so thrilled to have you on the show today in honor of the season of Thanksgiving. How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing well, and as well as can be. The world is a wild place to be a resident on this planet Earth, sometimes more than others. But today I'm grateful to be with you and for this opportunity. So thank you.
Well, you're so welcome. And I do want to talk about that, practicing gratitude when there's so much wrong in the world. We'll get there. I would love it if you talked to us about your journey towards finding grateful living as a lifestyle. You've had some health issues in the past. Why don't we start there? Tell us all about it.
So I had stage 4 cancer in my early 30s, and that was what I call a wake-up call. It was a massive taking me out of life as I expected it to be, and as most of my friends were living. And, and I think in our early 30s, if you want to talk about living life in a simple fashion, most people who were my peers at that time were really looking at life as if it was going to go on forever, and they were going to be able to own homes and get married and have kids and be in career tracks and save for retirement, like the things that you kind of do in your 30s. And suddenly everything was stripped away for me. I was very, very ill for a long time. And when I came out of that illness experience, I had such a different way of relating to life because I had a poor prognosis, and that poor prognosis was uh, basically you're going to be lucky if you live 3 years and you will have a recurrence. And if you have a recurrence, when you have that recurrence, you're not going to survive the recurrence. It will be fatal. So, stage 4 cancer, that's pretty tough. And so I came out and it just, everything in the world felt like it was so extraordinary to me that I needed very little. I craved for very little. Everything filled me up so much, from being able to walk, being able to be in my body, being able to be outside, hearing birds, all that kind of stuff, that it gave me this new perspective on life that I needed so much less than I had ever thought that I would need in order to experience real joy and love. And it crystallized what mattered to me. Let's just say that, and it gave me a new perspective on life.
It sounds like your illness really showed you that there's so much to be grateful for. There's so much extraordinariness, if that's a word, to pay attention to. But I found it interesting in your book, you said that in not maybe the days, not the weeks, maybe not even the months, but in the years post-cancer, the annoyances of daily life crept back in. And so I'm wondering, did your level of gratitude diminish over time? And if so, why do you think that happened?
I got back into the world. In the first few years, I was like, okay, well, I've got 3 years, so what I'm going to do, I wanted to be outdoors all the time. I wanted to be with my loved ones all the time. I wanted to be relating to the earth all the time. I wanted to be experiencing my body all the time. So then all of a sudden it was like, okay, I better go back to work, and when I made it 3 years, and I'd better, start contributing to the world in different ways and being out in the world. And that was when things changed, because suddenly I was going to a job. I decided to work for hospice. It was an amazing job, right? A great job. But still, it was about getting dressed up, getting in a car, driving to an office, which we used to do pre-COVID, going to places, being with people. And suddenly things that had escaped me before became really difficult for me, and things that I swore I would never be bothered by, that I would never be so superficial again as to care about, my weight. Because here I was like, oh my God, I have a body still. I get to live in a body, and it's so incredible. And I'm going to love this body no matter what it looks like or what it weighs. And the longer I lived, the less that held true, and so I don't care about what I wear. I don't care about, I'm so grateful to be alive. In our society especially, I think, you can talk about Western societies and economies where these kinds of things actually are really difficult to buck in the world, and easy to succumb to caring about things that really hard to hold fast to our values. Let's just say that in some ways. And so I got a really clear glimpse of how hard it is to hold on to our commitments, to our disciplines, to our practices, to our values, how hard it is to live through those things. So for me, it was like, oh, wow, I used to be so joyful and so grateful for the littlest things. And suddenly I built up a gratitude tolerance. It's like it took more and more and more and more for me to feel grateful. And I was bugged by more and more things all the time, so much more easily. And what I realized, Stephanie, is that to keep perspective is a practice. It's a discipline. It's something we have to renew constantly. It takes so much support from inside ourselves, from the people around us, in the world and how we set up our homes. Literally, how do we stay grateful for a tap that we can turn on and water comes out? Not only that, most of us can have warm water. And so a warm shower when it's cold in the morning. So how do we just stay in awe of the things that we take for granted so readily? And that was a practice I had to learn to develop again, because I knew my way back. I knew what it felt like as a reference point. I knew what it felt like to lose it. And so I did everything I could to figure out how to get back there again, because it was so joyful to live in that place where everything was kind of miraculous. Everything about my body, everything about having a home, a place to live, the littlest things could bring me so much pleasure. And I wanted to live that way again.
Yeah. I appreciate you mentioning the practice there.
Yeah.
It does take practice to strengthen the gratitude muscle, let's say. And that's because I would argue that our society, our way of life, our capitalistic endeavors, if you want to call it that, it all contributes to a pervasive feeling of scarcity, of not having enough, of always needing more. And to me, that goes directly against gratitude and gratefulness. So I would love to talk to you about the practice part.
Yes.
The practice. If we want strong muscles, we need to lift weights because we're not just going to get them, right?
Yeah, right,
and
exactly.
I think it's the same with practicing gratitude. But why? Why should we be putting the effort in to strengthen that gratitude muscle? What are some research-backed benefits to gratitude practice?
Mm-hmm. When we experience living gratefully, when we have encounters with gratitude, not just gratitude, because I'm going to argue that gratitude, the way that we've come to understand it, is actually quite materialistic. It's about getting what you want. It's about getting the perfect gift. It's about, when things go right. That's how we relate to gratitude. And that's a highly, highly conditional, fleeting feeling state. So, I think it's important to figure out, okay, what is gratefulness? Gratefulness is really living from the inside out gratefully. It's like basically a proactive approach to life versus a reactive approach to something good happening. So gratitude's super hard to hold on to. Gratefulness, I think, is a different way that we can think about not taking life and time for granted. The research it's kind of epic now, I think, what they've come up with in the past. I mean, gratitude's really been researched now in the past 10 years in a big way. And so they've got evidence now. It makes us more generous. It makes us, you can look at these studies. It makes us more socially likable. People like people who are grateful more, right, than people who are walking around complaining all the time. It helps us to be more resilient. It's a high level resilience builder to be grateful in our lives for what we have. It increases feelings of well-being. They can measure immune responses, heart responses. So in terms of what it does for the physical body to live in a state of being grateful versus to live in a state of scarcity and lack and complaint, that nothing's enough. It's good for relationships. Hugely good for relationships. Being ungrateful is a surefire way to take your relationship down the tubes. It's like if nothing is ever going to be enough and you're complaining all the time. So it's a real switch. It's a switch that we can turn and look for what there is to be grateful for and to start filling up the well of ourselves with that awareness and then all of a sudden, like Brother David says, you find yourself much happier. We can find ourselves much more content with things that we weren't content with before.
Yes, there was a quote in your book that I wrote down because it really struck me. It was a Brother David quote. He said, "It's not happiness that makes us grateful. It's gratefulness that makes us happy." In addition to all the benefits to practicing gratitude, I would say that it gives us, in addition to all of those, practicing gratitude regularly is an amazing way to gain perspective on problems. Is this traffic that's preventing me from getting to my daughter's gymnastics on time? Like, is this really something that I should allow to upend in my day or not?
Yeah.
And so I feel that way in terms of how gratitude and really actively working to flex that muscle has improved my life. But I'm wondering what you would say about it's gratefulness that makes us happy. Have you experienced that or anything related to that in your life?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If I wake up in the morning, so it's the reason why I call the book Wake Up Grateful is because if you wake up grateful and you can build that muscle first thing in the morning. Just for the fact of waking up in a body where you can open your eyes, you can move your legs, you can actually get out of bed. You have a bed to sleep in. You have air that's comfortable. You can potentially breathe unassisted. You could walk unassisted, there's so much that we can fill our awareness with to be grateful for. And in my experience, if you can't be grateful for what you have, like if you can't look around you and say, oh my gosh, and look inside you and say, there's so much to be grateful for, and it could keep me busy every single minute of the day. Instead, the opposite of happiness for me is in that kind of insatiability. It's never enough. And so we're chasing things that we think we're supposed to have. What more? I need more. The grass is greener. All of the stuff that's really antithetical to sustainability and minimalism and living a simple life. We just are pushed in our society, as you say. I think there's so much focus on more, newer, better, improved. There's comparison, right? Comparison is the thief of joy. And like, who do we compare ourselves to? We compare ourselves to people who have more than we do. If you compare yourself to people who have less than you do, it's a really big shift. It's actually not a thief of joy. We're so often full. Our lives are so full and are not lacking. And yet I can shift my perspective really easily by remembering when I didn't have the things that I have now. When I was so sick, I didn't have the well-being I have now. Someday I'm not going to have the well-being I have now. The ability to get up and walk out of my house on my two legs and be healthy enough to be able to enjoy my life. That's not going to be true always. So, I can compare myself to a marathon runner or, a runway model or something, which people get these crazy comparison ideas, celebrities or something. But why? To me, it's about, I want to be grateful for what I have access to in my life right now. And that takes consistent reinforcement of perspective that supports that contentment, that joy, the joy of it's enough. It's not even just enough. It's extraordinary. It's a miracle. It's an absolute and incredible miracle to have what we have and to be who we are.
Yes, I'm totally going to butcher your words, but the mic drop moment in your book for me was, when we talk about gratitude, from a lot of us, for me, even sometimes, when I think about what I'm grateful for, it's always an external thing. Like I'm thankful for my house. I'm thankful for my car. I'm thankful for food. I don't know. However, in your book, you mentioned that it's not about necessarily whether your glass is half empty or half full. Yeah. It's the fact that you have a glass.
Yeah, exactly. And that's such a great moniker for the work that you stand for what we all stand for in terms of values. Because half full or half empty doesn't really matter. It's like at the end, it's like, do you have a glass at all? And the glass is, are you alive? Are you aware that you're breathing? Are you aware that for me, the reminder is I have lost so many people to cancer who I've loved. And my mom died while I was writing the book. And, when I have loss in my life and I think about all the people right now who are losing their lives to conflict around the world and all to hunger. And I think I get to be alive today. There are millions of people who would give anything to be alive today. And why am I taking that for granted? Why is that not enough? Why is it not enough to be able to breathe? COVID taught us really vividly, that to have health and to have well-being, that these are not to be, we so often take them for granted and we dismiss those as if those aren't important. And so how do we make the most important things important again? How do we remember what's important and what really matters? I think that's part of the practice.
Well, I'm going to ask you exactly that, Kristi. We're going to take our ad break, but when we come back, I want to talk to you about fighting back against what you call gratitude tolerance, when we have plenty, but we forget about it in the pursuit of getting more. So we're going to talk about fighting back against gratitude tolerance after a quick sponsor break. You trust your water filter pitcher to make your tap water safe to drink, but is it really doing anything? Most filters just can't remove gross contaminants like bacteria and parasites and PFAS and microplastics. I could go on and on. I trust my water filter pitcher for water that's safe for my family to drink. And if the brand I bought isn't doing what it advertised to do, that makes me feel so frustrated. Enter LifeStraw Home. LifeStraw Home is the kitchen upgrade you will wish you made years ago. It's the only water pitcher that filters out over 30 contaminants. It's made of glass, not plastic, and most importantly, for every pitcher sold, a child in need receives a year of safe water. Better filtration, better taste, better design. Use code SUSTAINABLE for 20% off your first purchase of any LifeStraw Home product at lifestraw.com. Cannot be combined with other offers. And we're back. Today I'm speaking with Kristi Nelson. She is the author of the book that I loved and is so poignant, especially now in November as we head into Thanksgiving. The name of the book is Wake Up Grateful, The Practice of Taking Nothing for Granted. Kristi, we're at that point in the conversation where we've nailed down the why, but I want to get into the how. So how do we practice gratitude? How do we flex that muscle? But more specifically, how do we fight back against gratitude tolerance, which is, of course, what used to be plenty, what used to be more than enough, is we forget about it because we're pursuing more. So how do we fight back against gratitude tolerance?
Mm-hmm. So there's always, I love this saying that we're always practicing something. So, at this point where we direct our attention is what we're practicing, basically. Where we put our attention is what we experience of life. That's how we shape our lives. So one of the things that we have to do is really stop. So for me, practice, any kind of meaningful practice is going to be reliant on stopping and pausing and being able to get really present to life and to feel the fact that life is a gift. To feel the fact when we stop, it's like be aware of how much is streaming toward you at every moment in service of life, in service of the fact of being alive. What is working in your life right now that is supporting life? Stop. Get very basic. Brother David says too, it's enough to be grateful for the next breath. Let's start with a very simple wake up grateful. The idea is, can you wake up and be grateful before anything has even happened yet? Gratitude tolerance, I think, can be like when we journal at the end of the day and it's like 3 things today I was grateful that happened. 3 things today I was grateful I got. 3 things today I was grateful that I noticed I have or that are working for me. And so all of a sudden it's like, there's nothing new anymore. Well, what if it was just we could revisit the exact same things over and over again? Really, life is a gift. When you greet each moment gratefully, you are always receiving. So that's really a beautiful, amazing thing, which is true, which is we don't have to wait for anything to happen or to receive anything more. We're already receiving so much. So wake up grateful is start to cultivate the ability to notice what you have to be grateful for before anything more has happened. We're always waiting for the more. We're waiting for all the green lights and the red lights and yellow lights. We just begrudge them and they're not to be grateful for. But what happens if it's actually good to slow down? It's good to stop. It's good to yield. So I think the practice really is that perspective. How do we fight back against gratitude tolerance? And it's an interesting thing. It's like, how do we claim our right to be grateful? As opposed to just fighting back, it's like, like this place inside of me that just says, wait a minute, don't tell me I'm not enough. Don't tell me I don't have enough. Don't tell me life isn't enough. There's so many people who would give anything to have the lives that we have and what we have and the bodies that we have, even with their aches and pains and the things that don't work, right? Everything is surprise. When you open to wonder, opportunities abound. Really, we forget to be in wonder. We forget to look around and notice when we look like, oh my God, that is incredible. That is awe-inspiring. How do we come to take nature so for granted? What the natural world is doing all the time, what our bodies are doing all the time, what we have available to us all the time is enough to blow our minds. The ordinary is extraordinary. There's nothing ordinary really about life. So I think being willing to be in awe is one of the most important things. And you know what it takes? It actually takes vulnerability. We have to be willing to be vulnerable, to be able to say, this moves me. Sometimes it moves me to tears when I see how much is available to me in my life. And I experience it as privilege because not everybody has it. and I didn't used to have it. And one day I won't have it again. So why do, the gratitude tolerance is built in this idea of I'm taking it for granted. That's the biggest place of gratitude tolerance. It's always going to be here.
Well, Kristi, a couple weeks ago, I mentioned driving to gymnastics in traffic, and that's actually a real example from my life. A couple weeks ago, I was late, rushing through town, trying to get my kids to gymnastics on time. My monkey mind was doing, what it normally does, which is run through the laundry list of things that I have to do, plus, the anxiety of being late, the frustration of sitting in traffic. My mood wasn't great. And then I just found myself taking a deep breath and looking around. I live in New England, and a few weeks ago was prime leaf changing season.
It was gorgeous. Got gorgeous. Yes.
Yes. And, I live in an area with historic homes and just like everything out of a portrait, a painting, what you would see in like a quintessential New England portrait in the autumn is where I live. And so I took a deep breath, and I'm sitting in traffic and I'm looking around, and I just thought to myself, holy moly, like I am living it. There's so much to experience and enjoy if I can only just get out of my head and see it. And so you mentioned that a lot of us, maybe we don't appreciate what we already have. Yeah. I would say that for me, oftentimes I'm so stuck in my mind, in my monkey mind, that I don't even see what I have.
100%.
For listeners who resonate with my little Norman Rockwell story there, what would you suggest is step one for seeing? Because you can't be grateful for what you don't even see or recognize or realize you have. So what's step one?
Step one is slowing down and stopping. There's a reason, like when you get stopped in traffic, it's interesting. It's like, I'm stopped in traffic. Like I say, the red light, the yellow light, if we can't be present. So mindfulness is the precondition, the ability to be present is a precondition for any experience that's going to matter. If you're not where you are, then you're somewhere else. And it's like, how can you possibly notice where you are if you're not where you are? You're in the future, you're in the past, you're in complaint, you're begrudging what's happening. So it's like, okay, whoa, soften, be here, open up the doors of awareness. And like you said, just turn to notice. And I use prompts all the time. I use poetry. I use quotes. I use questions. I put little Post-it notes on things. Don't forget to be grateful for me, right? Like, you go to the refrigerator, you open it up. It's like, who says it's amazing to have a refrigerator? If you have a refrigerator, you're like one of 25 to 30% of the people in the world, that even have the ability. So like, how is it that we are able to so readily forget the privileges that we have in our lives? And one of the things that it is a practice that I think is very helpful for kind of the moment, Stephanie, that you're talking about, which is the have to get to practice, which I think is powerful, which is we think all the time. If you think all the time, I have to go pick up my daughter. I have to go get in the car. I have to go get groceries. I have to run errands. I have to do chores. I have to is a grind of the mind grind. And instead switch that to, I get to go pick up my daughter at gymnastics. Whoa. How many things about that are incredible? First of all, that your daughter can do gymnastics, that she has a body, that she's able to do that you're able to go get in a car and actually drive somewhere and pick her up from an experience that she's having. There's so many things I get to. And so I do that a lot when I feel I do a lot of caregiving. My parents, my step-parents are older, my dad and my stepmom and so there's things that are required in life, of caregiving. And I often think, okay, I have to cook for my stepdad today. I have to go drive him over all this food. And then I think I get to cook for my stepdad. I get to go pick up this beautiful person in my life. I get to go to a store and be able to buy groceries. How many things about that are incredible? I have the money to be able to buy myself food. I have a place I can go to buy food. So it's about remembering how much we're not remembering so much of the time.
And the inverse is also true, because when you practice gratitude, or at least when I practice gratitude, and I give myself that moment to stop and pause and look at the world through grateful eyes, I experienced that sense of awe and wonder that you perhaps felt in your early days of remission. And when you're looking at the world through eyes and seeing the awe and wonder that's all around us all the time, it's like the black veil that is the daily grind gets lifted and everything's brighter. Everything's more manageable almost. And everything is, again, in perspective. But before we say goodbye, Kristi, I do want to ask you, I mean, there are indeed some truly terrible moments, some truly sucky moments in life. What are your best thoughts for practicing grateful living in those sucky moments of grief or illness or just general struggle?
So, life can be really, really hard. And for me, it's also that my heart breaks for the world, for the planet. I am super impacted by the headlines every day right now. Anybody who's alive and has a heart that's open is going to feel, I think, besieged by what's going on in the world. It's so hard. And it's hard to make sense of. And yet I think what has made the biggest difference for me is realizing that one of the ways that I can contribute to the world the most is through kindness, through generosity, through sharing what there is, through little acts of giving care to the world. I love to walk and I pick up litter everywhere I go, much to the chagrin of most of my friends who think like, why are you picking that up? Oh my God, it's so good. But it's one of the things that I feel like there are little things that I can do, the kind of micro actions, the micro kindnesses that we can extend to one another. It's one of the things that I think helps to heal a lot of where it is that we feel so undone by life, is to actually do life differently and to make life better for other people. I mean, we know there's so much statistic about being able to get beyond ourselves sometimes, and to realize, in grief, there's so much of the world that is grieving, that the sense of being so alone with our experiences is really so much, I think, there's a myth around that, or an illusion. I think we're really connected to each other in the things that we're grieving and the things that we're sorrow, our hearts are broken. And so reaching out to somebody, especially around this time of year. And so this is a time of year, I think, when it's really to say thank you to more people, just in a more clear way. Like, what if around Thanksgiving, we made it a holiday where we thank the people that we take for granted? Think of 10 people you take for granted who are making your life better, who are making your life possible every day, who have made your life possible in some way, and express your appreciation for them in some way. This is a really easy thing to do with the people around us. And I think it helps. It doesn't solve the larger global problems, but it helps us feel more sense of agency and more connected when we can kind of catalyze a grateful ripple, make something powerful and positive happen around you in your heart or whatever. And because we're never going to make life absent the difficulty, and we can't be grateful for horrible things and hard things. We can't be grateful for everything, but we can try to be grateful in every moment. And I'm going to end with one quote that I think is really important. And it is by a guy named Marlon Rico Lee. And he says, be grateful for the things and people you have in your life. Everything you have, everything you take for granted, everyone you take for granted, someone somewhere is praying for. Someone somewhere is longing for. And that's the whole reason I wrote the book, was to wake us up to what we have and realize that even a window, even a cup of tea, even the ability to hear a bird, that they're all miracles if we tune into them as such.
I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today, Kristi. I got an awful lot out of our conversation, and I wish you an abundant Thanksgiving season. Thank you.
You as well. Thank you so much for what you do and what you stand for.
Listeners, that's a wrap. Show notes are at mamaminimalist.com/418. And we do have a bit of an eco tip today. It comes from Deborah. Deborah listened to last Thursday's episode all on how to buy soap. Deborah is a connoisseur of homemade soap. She's been making it herself for over 2 decades. Because of irritated skin issues, she found really that the only thing that would work for her was homemade soap. And she suggested that I mention that many homemade soap makers who sell at markets, farmers markets perhaps, do add sodium lauryl sulfate or SLS into their products. The reason being that SLS adds the suds, it adds the lather that so many of us want and desire in our soaps. We tend to think that products that lather and suds up are better at cleaning, right? But that's not the case. And so Deborah says that it's not what's in homemade soap that makes it great. It's what's not in it that makes it great. And so homemade soaps from markets without the sodium lauryl sulfate or laureth sulfate are where we should be putting our hard-earned money. And so if you're in the habit of buying those soaps from smaller makers, definitely inquire as to whether they have the sodium lauryl or laureth sulfate, the SLS, in their products. Thank you, Deborah. Excellent tip there. Listeners, will be back on Thursday. I will see you then. Reach out if you need me, and take care.